Hi, everyone. I'm Marcelyn Gow, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to SCI-Arc this evening, to our spring lecture series evening lecture. On behalf of SCI-Arc, I'd like to extend a very special welcome, or I should say welcome back, to our speakers tonight, Katherine Johnson and Rebecca Rudolph. Both Katherine and Rebecca are alumni of SCI-Arc, and it's always a very important moment, I think, for the SCI-Arc community to hear from our alumni, to see what they're working on, how their trajectories have evolved since their days in this building or in the other buildings. I think both of you have different histories that kind of overlap at SCI-Arc, and even some of the tents here that were outside in the parking lot at SCI-Arc. And so, I think it's important for our students as well to see and to begin to imagine what their futures might hold and how the kind of networks and contacts that they make here, that you make here, may really inform your future practice. So I hope we hear a little bit about that as well as seeing all your work. And Katherine and Rebecca's firm, and I'm going to try to enunciate this in the proper way as a command, is design bitches with a comma in between. It's really calling us to think about what is our role as architects today, and how we need to be emphatic. We need to have a voice. We really need to be outspoken, and we need to constantly be thinking about how our role as architects is evolving. And I think that's something that's very apparent in Katherine and Rebecca's work. The work of design, bitches, focuses on bodies in space and spaces of interaction between people. Influences include a combination of contemporary and pop art, technology, fabrication. These are combined with other modes of cultural production and really make us think about our position in spaces as we encounter things that might be familiar, might seem everyday, but suddenly become extraordinary. Materials, objects, things as small as a doorknob, things as large as building systems. How can we begin to see them differently, in a different way? I think these are some of the kinds of odd and unexpected layerings that occur in the projects. Things that might create multiple experiences in a space, depending on how we perceive this kind of engagement between two-dimensional graphic media, three-dimensional volumetric space, massing, how these might begin to kind of redefine our bodily experience and engagement with those spaces. And I think these questions of the everyday have become more and more salient in the kind of the current moment. A lot of our students here at the moment are kind of exploring some of these questions, like saying how do things that are ordinary actually become quite remarkable when we consider them? How do we think about issues of the mundane and the habitual, and how do we begin to collapse the distinction between what we might consider to be architecture with a capital A and those things, those sort of everyday rituals that we perform. And so I think this work will open up some dimension in terms of that discussion. The work celebrates the functionality of everyday objects while imbuing them with distinctive character and personality. And familiar materials are rediscovered in new contexts, and architecture encounters our everyday life. Many of Design Bitches' focus on the engagement of three-dimensional and two-dimensional graphics, examining how these admixtures can modify our perceptions of space. Katherine and Rebecca are dedicated to making architecture accessible to a broader audience. This is exemplified by projects that I hope we'll see this tonight, such as the recently completed 9 Dots, a STEM education nonprofit incorporating classrooms, offices, makerspace for both adults and children, kind of opening itself out to the community and trying to create a dialogue and introduce architecture to these wider audiences. Design Bitches has been recognized with multiple awards from the AIA LA Surface Architects newspaper. They've been shortlisted for the Moira Gemmell Prize for Emerging Architecture and selected as the 2017 recipient of AIA LA's Emerging Practice Award. Katherine and Rebecca have co-taught at the University of Oregon. They've lectured at Columbia University, Yale University, Cal Arts, UCLA, and George Washington University. They were keynote speakers at the New Zealand Institute of Architects inaugural Festival of Architecture. They've served as jurors of AIA awards throughout the US and have participated in numerous workshops and symposia, including the 7th Annual Women in Design Conference, See Me, I Am Here Symposium at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and readings from the LA Forum Reader. This year, they collaborated with Dzine and Adidas to create a park concept incorporating unexpected programmatic adjacencies called Stomping Grounds. Katherine received her M.Arc from SCI-Arc and her B.I.Arc from the University of Oregon. Rebecca received her M.Arc from SCI-Arc and a Master of Philosophy from the University of Paris 8. Tonight's lecture will explore questions surrounding inspiration, collaboration, connecting with community and clients, and how material and spatial experimentation can contribute to the meaning a place has for us and our emotional connection to it. I look forward to seeing what Katherine and Rebecca have been working on and hearing about how their experiences at SCI-Arc have helped evolve this trajectory in their professional work. And also keep an eye out for a forthcoming interview. We just interviewed Katherine and Rebecca last week for SCI-Arc Channel. That'll be coming out next month in a couple of weeks. And please join me in welcoming Katherine Johnson and Rebecca Rudolph back to SCI-Arc. Thank you.
Hello. So thanks to the SCI-Arc community for having us, and to Marcelyn for those nice words. It's really exciting for us to be back here, especially to me, because this was my home campus. As you'll see in our work, let's see if I can get this going. As you'll see in our work, we like to lift boundaries between disciplines and find the places where interesting overlaps inspire us to tweak the rules. Outside can be inside. Architecture is performance. Graphics are spatial. And pragmatism can be rebellious. Our collaboration as Design Bitches began in 2010 out of a shared desire to expand the definition of architecture. The name itself was a response to the question, what is architecture? It's design, bitches. For us, architecture is all about design and disregarding outdated formal boundaries between artistic disciplines. We're inspired by the small surprises we find in the culture of daily life and find innovative ways to weave the influences into what we create. We're pragmatists, but with rebellious spirits, and we search for ways to embed function in clever and unexpected places. By embracing our outside interests, we've been able to develop our own unique voice in our work, one that is both surprising and referential. We use it to create our brand of architecture, one that is versatile and accessible to a broader audience. We create designs that solve problems with elements of design and wit that challenge users to think differently about how they interact with space.
So Kathy and I are collaborators with different interests and similar goals. Kathy is the choreographer, I am the storyteller. We work in a variety of mediums and scales, and we think of our differences as the foundation of our collaboration. Both of us are interested in combining the odd and the unexpected and in connecting the practice of architecture to everyday life. I grew up in suburban San Diego, far from what I thought was a creative melting pot of places like San Francisco and New York. My first taste of the 1980s merging of pop art and commerce was through a subscription to Andy Warhol's Interview magazine. It had strong visuals that were a collage of different types of medium, and it profiled a variety of creative people, from artists to musicians to actors. I found this creative mix incredibly inspiring. I wanted to make something that had that energy and cultural impact. And then when I visited New York for the first time, the space that I remember having the most impact on me was Keith Haring's Pop Shop. It was an incredible, immersive, all-encompassing work of art where when you were there, you felt like you really had a direct connection to the artist. The space was completely transformed by the artwork, and it left a lasting emotional impression on me. I think this is where I first felt a strong connection between creativity and the making of a place.
So I have loved to dance since I was very young. And over the years, I have discovered that what brought me joy when dancing is really easy for me to link to what I find most exciting about being an architect. Both dance and architecture contemplate how to capture the energy of a space created between dancers or architectural elements, how to create compelling relationships between a single part and a larger composition, and the social impact of visual storytelling. I love that the smallest intricacies of movement or design can be just as powerful as a grand gesture. It's the combination of all of these things that add richness and complexity. My love of hip hop and the idea of sampling and mixing musical genres and time periods together really began to inspire me to find ways to do that in my own work. Our design research is done in real time through building. Lessons learned from each project feed new quests for those that have yet to come. We're passionate about social connectivity and building it through types of social spaces. We feed off of the story of a place and root our work in a desire to build on that storyline, carrying it forward in unexpected ways. We started with restaurants because they tend to be relatively small and are more accessible than private spaces. Superba was one of our first built projects, and it enabled us to test our ideology and way of working right from the start. It's a tripartite project situated in Venice Beach, and it included 2 buildings of very different scales, both with outdoor space and the graphics and branding design for both. We have a strong interest in the relationships between 3-dimensional space and 2-dimensional graphics. So the opportunity to do both at 2 locations within a mile of each other in a place that we knew really well was an extraordinary testing ground. So as most of you might know, Venice is a neighborhood with a rich history, both of artistic and architectural experimentation, and historically is known for being a little odd, which is exactly what we love about it. So as we often do, we started our exploration with the place itself, digging for hidden gems of ideas and stories within Venice Beach culture. Together with our client and a young chef named Jason Neroni, we built Superba Snack Bar based on the wonderfully wacky roots of Venice and infused that eccentric past into a new neighborhood hangout that feels true both to the Venice that had always been and embracing its new directions. Superba Snack Bar was quite small, only 1,500 square feet, and pushing the open extension of the patio to the very edge of the sidewalk gave the neighborhood a key view straight into the kitchen and all of the action. Venice is filled with tight-knit neighborhoods, including walk streets where neighbors often hang out in their front yards and may casually drop in. This inspired the wall at the patio's edge, which we kept low purposefully to encourage conversation between diners and their neighbors passing by. The perimeter bench creates a comfortable and occupiable edge, which we covered in pool tile as a nod to the summers of 1970s and Venice Beach's Dogtown and Z-Boys, where casual summer nights during the drought were historically spent gathered along the poolside edge, chatting with friends and skateboarding in empty pools. On the interior, we added some of this poolside grit by using rough exterior materials as finish materials, using things like rough raked stucco on the walls and concrete with really large aggregate. We then mixed them with finish layers that could work both inside and out. Like poncho blankets are used throughout the space, both as upholstery and for wrapping up on foggy nights. These blankets were purchased directly from the boardwalk, nearby as a nod to the film character, Jeff Spicoli, in the 1980s film Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The urban fabric of LA is peppered with billboards that rise up from even the low-rise neighborhoods like Venice. So we created a mural of custom wallpaper that extends and transforms from the interior wall below into an illuminated billboard above the building. Here we appropriated a quote by comic artist R. Crumb and used it to express what we love about Venice. She is beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like nature itself. We built upon this idea when developing the branding and graphic design for Superba, allowing it to be both referential and artistic. By integrating auto racing fonts from the 60s, some oddball hand-drawn sketches repeated in relentless fields, we layered text and imagery into a sampled collage of embedded reference. It's intentionally quirky, and the handheld takeaway version of the brand then is allowed to directly connect back to the experience that a user might have in the physical space. We extended this work, punctuating moments on the exterior with signs that reference game pieces like Scrabble tiles, and incorporated loosely hand-drawn versions of the much tighter logo. Neon script and a supersized hand-painted loaf of bread overlap door openings, which add both two-dimensional wit to the exterior and an unexpected element of surprise. By positioning the graphic where it overlaps the doors below, we allow it to morph through use. Lines are breaking and reconnecting as the doors open and close throughout the day. Superba Food and Bread is a larger neighborhood hub that includes an on-site bakery. The existing site was a decaying auto body shop that was surrounded by cars in disrepair, dilapidated fencing, and several unexceptional additions on the east side of Lincoln Boulevard. It's a very typical LA intersection between a high-voltage thoroughfare and a quiet bungalow-lined residential street, which can often feel impenetrable by foot. So the site provided us with the ideal opportunity to connect and convert this static corner into a bright and lively one that is easily accessible. By tearing off the building's useless appendages, we rid the site of its tacked-on excess and broke it down to its skeleton, maintaining the existing garage bay penetrations, leaving pieces of its automotive history intact. We heavily integrated bold, graphic moves on the exterior as a nod to some of our inspirations found in the prolific Venice Beach artist studios of the 60s and 70s of painters like Ed Moses. The embedded artistic reference extends inside as we playfully mess with perceptions of materiality, visual weight, and sometimes proportion. At the corner coffee bar, we really wanted to play with our perceptions of light and heavy by using materials like a steel cage overhead and adding mirror underneath the bar. We flip our common perceptions of visual weight topsy-turvy. We used the mirror to unexpectedly reflect disembodied feet that seem to walk on into infinity. In opposition to this lightness, we constructed a visually soft but physically massive puffed bench nicknamed the Cloud underneath the building's largest opening at the original garage door. The placement allows the mass to spread through the wall and onto the patio, positioning guests back to back while they're simultaneously inhabiting different worlds. From the exterior, the concrete cloud appears to have grown seamlessly from the ground plane, allowing it to continue a visual flow of material from the sidewalk all the way back to the rear of the building. The reference is massive, yet playful. It's surprisingly solid in contrast to what its soft edges might bring to mind. We set out to create places that delightfully surprise people, so they want to include them in their daily rituals. And we received one of the greatest compliments when we found out that Ed Moses himself used to hang out there every morning. By reclaiming an old auto body shop and opening up the building to the street, we enabled Superba Food and Bread to create its own type of urban parkscape. It's transformative in its locale, its energy, and its function.
We want to connect our work to the surrounding city in a way that is open and draws people in, with new social spaces that are hybrids of home, work, and school. Our interests and experimentation that started with the restaurant projects have grown to include other program types. 9 Dots is a STEM education space in central Los Angeles that started as a tutoring center for underserved kids and has since grown to include workshops for teachers that go out into schools and partnering with other STEM-focused nonprofits. At 9 Dots, we focused on strategically inserting volumes and large-scale custom furniture in a way that would allow them to run multiple programs at the same time. Angled walls and sloped roof lines fit together at the new classrooms and offices like a collection of sculptural objects within the larger space, encouraging exploration between and around them. We incorporated angled walls at the office volume to draw you towards the center of the semi-open workspace. Skylights pop in and out of the ceiling plane, bringing in natural light and creating curious shifts in perspective as you move through the space. The workspaces are informally arranged and vary in degrees of porosity and privacy to spur collaboration. Sloping roofs help the classrooms feel taller inside but not imposing from the outside, and still allow you to experience the larger volume of the space and read the connection between the structure and the new insertions. Room size areas, the makerspace, library, classrooms, and offices have been sectioned off from the whole in a flexible way that allows multiple programs to happen simultaneously and the separate groups working in the space to feel connected. There's a playful purpose to all of the surfaces, both inside and out on the volumes. They're useful for pinup, for projection, and for sound attenuation. And they provoke curiosity. They add a warmth and a richness of color that allows the social complexity of the 9 Dots program to thrive in the space. In Highland Park, we breathe new life into a previously neglected building, transforming it into a community asset by opening up a closed world for discovery at Fig Lodge and Checker Hall. It's located in a former Masonic lodge on the 2nd floor of a nationally registered historic building that has a really interesting mix of tenants. The ground floor has burger lords, a vintage clothing shop, a city council person's office, and a Latin bakery, and there's a hip-hop producer on the 3rd floor mezzanine above. The Masonic Lodge was in the past a private club, a highly ritualized performance space that we transformed into a public venue. It's now a theater with affordable shows and a restaurant and bar, a place where you can experience current culture and discover the history of the place. We kept much of the Masonic Lodge's mystic character and layered on top of these details saturated color and a progressive mix of materials, drawing inspiration from the entire lifespan of the place. Artists from the arts and crafts movement at the turn of the century painted landscapes that celebrated the natural environment of the nearby Arroyo Seco riverbed. We drew from this artistic past and contemporary artists that moved in the 80s and 90s to connect the interior of the space to the natural world. Through color and lighting, the theater has been transformed into a space somewhere between inside and out. Saturated color shifts as you move through the space, from blue in the theater to green in the restaurant, with a range in between that draws you intuitively through. Details allude to the Masonic history and the flora and fauna of the Arroyo, from mystic eye wallpaper and marbled banquettes in the dining nook to thistles and checkered fabric booths. The new bar in the center of the dining room, in the form of a Masonic symbol, creates pockets around it for gathering and a whirling flow that now has both a strong center and an occupied edge. We're constantly inspired by nature, finding ways to draw the interiors out and connect them to their surroundings, tying a place to its larger context by designing from the inside out. Garden House is the reinvention of a typical Los Angeles bungalow. We took it down to the studs and broke it open, removing a portion that blocked the connection between the front and back and designing the landscape with a wild mix of plants that flow over the boardwalk, creating meandering paths. Working on both the house and the landscape, we crafted the views, opening the corner completely at the kitchen to the new garden and enclosing the more private bedroom and working spaces in solid planes. We really wanted the inside to feel connected to the passing of time and the changing of seasons, and for the views from the inside to draw you out. Our goal with this house was to take full advantage of the smallish lot by creating outdoor spaces that would really be used. We pulled the volume apart, transforming interior walls into exterior walls and creating outdoor rooms that match the scale of the interior. We reoriented the entry so that you walk through the garden to get into the house and studio, creating a new threshold that feels somewhere between inside and out. Materials and bold colors drawn from the plants and sky are repeated on the inside and the outside to visually connect the two. We often like to play with using exterior construction materials on the interior to reinforce this connection. The same cement board panels are used here on the outside and on the kitchen island, and the cedar siding extends into the living space. The boardwalks connect the site to the nearby LA River, and they create a sense that the banks are nearby and the water could flow through and around the structures. The landscape adds a layer of wildness and unpredictability that changes over time, and it's one of the key reasons that we feel the connection between inside and outside are so important.
So how can you mix the growth of wildness and nature on buildings with really tight quarters? Living in Venice means that making the most of really small lots that are tightly knit together with neighbors. Our clients, a musician and a writer-editor and their young daughter, live a life that's really variable and fluid. They often work from home, keep very unusual hours, and have people sort of flowing in and out, staying with them for extended periods of time. This site, while it's sandwiched closely to neighboring houses, has this incredible sense of openness to the sky, with a view that's punctuated by rows of palm trees. Knowing that the innermost part of the site would really become the true center of the house, we created a dynamic connection between the main house and the guest house studio through the new interior yard between. It's a neighborhood known for both iconic beach bungalows and architectural experimentation. So by maintaining the integrity of the traditional bungalow and adding a bar slid through it, the house makes an argument for the resilience of archetypes, playing out juxtaposition in a small house that speaks to modernist volumes. It is at the intersection of these volumes and the layers between them that give us opportunity to break some rules. At the upstairs studio in the rear, we peeled back the roof from 1/3 of the volume, creating a distinctly different experience on either side of the central yard. The master bedroom acts basically as a treehouse, which will overlook, while the studio is set back a bit and screened by some flowing Babylonian planting and a dwarf aromatic citrus grove at the second-story green roof. We pushed the pool both directly against the house and slightly above grade so that the pool's edge also serves as perimeter seating around the central yard. Interior windows have been punched through the upstairs volumes so that conversations can be continued from upstairs down through the main living spaces and out into the yard. The double-height front room has a sleeping loft that will initially act as a bedroom, but can transition into another guest space, a recording room, or even an office in the future. Proportionally, we've intentionally kept everything thoughtfully relative to its surroundings. While carefully crafted, we prefer houses that are instantly comfortable, not too precious to use. We encourage a little sand tracked in from the beach, and in allowing the wildness and unpredictability of life to really come in, making a rich and wonderful, vibrant environment to live in. We embrace the spaces between by adding surprising pockets between buildings, maximizing visual space when actual space is cramped by a dense urban fabric. On another tight lot in Silver Lake, we created one of our the first of 5 actually, training centers for counterculture coffee. So counterculture operates a kind of a unique business model in the coffee space. They roast wholesale, ship direct to consumer, and build training centers rather than cafes where they educate the next generation of cutting-edge coffee people. At the LA Training Center, we had the opportunity to create a very different kind of workplace, one that enabled them to host various classes of different sizes at multiple stations and really embrace the neighborhood. We were fortunate to discover an unused space between the building and its neighbor, and knew it was exactly what we needed to take over and create an indoor-outdoor classroom. Organized in a plus formation with 2 relatively equal axes, the interior space is activated in multiple directions, and it allows for maximum flexibility and connection to the outdoors. The primary education axis is flooded with Southern California sunshine through large glass pocketing sliding doors and connects seamlessly to the new outdoor amphitheater, taking full advantage of the formerly unused real estate. The addition of mirror at the top of the seating provides a visual connection back to the rest of the classroom inside, where the counterculture instructors work around a large central brewing station and where students are encouraged to gather around. The supporting role of the secondary axis off to the sides are de-emphasized and grayed out, allowing them to visually recess into the background. Multiple brewing stations have been arranged around a central element that we have nicknamed the Ziggurat, which acts both as a room divider and additional seating. By taking a common and humbly iconic material like colored fiberglass, which is often used as a cheap outdoor patio cover, and highlighting its color and texture as an elevated design feature, we change the perception of the material entirely. While the Ziggurat could simply have been a partition, its added depth transforms it into something that is highly functional, both in place and when it's partially deconstructed. Within the Ziggurat, we have hidden small cubes that can be pulled out as needed for additional seating for classes or tables within the casual workspace, both carefully proportioned to maximize viewing height and flexibility.
Small interventions in the city can be as powerful as large ones, and the same applies to the tiniest details within the space. Button Mash is a collaboration between a group of us who came together to make a small disruptive intervention in Echo Park. We worked with a beer nerd, a game nerd, an underground chef, and an artist to transform an unremarkable strip mall into something that reflects the rich artistic inner life of the neighborhood. We carved out a series of interlocking volumes within the space that allow the different uses to coexist. A vintage arcade, an Asian street food restaurant, and a craft beer and wine bar. The angled walls and ceiling planes form shifts in perspective that allow glimpses through and across, but never fully reveal what's on the other side. When you enter through the wallpaper-covered tunnel, you feel almost as if you're in another world. It's the Button Mash version of the city, where different kinds of people, from kids to families, couples, and parties, can all coexist. Color is used to define the space without walls, enveloping you and drawing you around and behind the bar to a hidden door in the pinball room that leads to a retail store and a gallery space on the other side. We designed everything in the space with varying scale in mind, embedding references from 80s video games to the nearby police academy and film noir. There is visual texture up close and from across the room. We collaborated with an artist based out of Indiana on custom wallpaper and artwork that is incorporated throughout the space in unexpected places. The result is a kaleidoscopic space that continues to change every time you go back. Our work often involves a close collaboration with artists and clients. And at the Valentine and Grass Room event space, which is nearby here on 4th Street, the client is both. The existing buildings were a collection of brick structures with wood-framed roofs spanning almost a city block that had housed a number of things over the years, from a warehouse to a hotel to an illegal cannabis grow house. It's now a modern event space that holds up to 1,000 people and combine bits of the original structures with new steel-framed infill and operable greenhouse roofs. We decided to keep a few selected pieces of the existing buildings, the 2-story corner fronting 4th Street and half of a bowstring truss building along the alley, and remove the rest, slotting the new structures between these existing brick walls. It's essentially a ground-up building that feels like a collection built over time. Salvaged materials were collected from the demolition and used to create otherworldly spaces on the interior, where the client worked with a team of artist friends to paint custom murals and hand-apply surfaces to the entire space. We treated the preserved pieces of the existing building as found objects and grew the space around them. The interior is varied in height and width, so the proportions shift as you move through the building. They feel more compressed in the banquet halls and open up as you move into the courtyard spaces. They're flexible and can be open or closed to one another independently. Portions of the sidewalk were cut open and areas of the slab left out for planting that straddles the exterior walls, both inside and out. They feel massive and porous at the same time.
So we often design with proportion in mind and are intrigued by the idea of insertion rather than removal. We use this strategy to study how this affects both activity and patterns of human behavior in space. We were able to playfully exaggerate some of these ideas by collaborating with the Google design team on their annual design conference SPAN. Both venues in Tokyo and LA were just large open spaces. So we translated primitive graphic shapes into volumes and used their placement and scale to create a different rhythm of spaces within, between, and around them. In Tokyo, we used a giant truncated cone overhead to create a place underneath that people could feel comfortable stepping under, tucking out of the way amidst the flow of circulation. It's large in scale, but light in materiality, and it provides the effect of stepping under either a tree or a canopy along a sidewalk. A similar effect was created in Los Angeles by using a semicircular bench with a curtain overhead, upon which attendees could pause and check messages at varying vantage points between workshops. We created custom furniture of varying scales for this project, both in height and orientation, to punctuate the rooms and encourage equity and conversation. Minimalist interior trellises were constructed to punctuate the spaces where guests were intended to pause. Select edges of the framed structures are highlighted in black to emphasize the two-dimensional graphic roots of each shape, using the graphics of space to reconnect them visually to the surrounding supergraphics. These structures create iconic points of reference and assistance in wayfinding for guests, leading to locate pop-up shops, cafes, lounge spaces, and workshop areas. On occasion, translucent colored panels were inserted overhead to alter the quality of light. We're always searching for ways to create multiple experiences in a single space, while embedding a sense of discovery and surprise. The importance of human engagement is a crucial element of our work. Connection both with our clients and the public users of the places we create help to further our own discovery.
Our clients are creative, from a rock star to film editor, digital designers, and surfing entrepreneurs. But they're also pragmatists who are building businesses and homes that need to work. They're dreamers and schemers, and what we share with them is a desire to create something new and unique. Most of our clients are in the business of social engagement, of bringing people together. We work with them to experiment with spatial experience and research in real time, designing solutions that work in unexpected ways. There's a consistency to the ideas explored in our designs because we share common goals with our clients. The desire to create spaces that encourage creativity and collaboration, that people want to return to again and again, that feel comfortable and also challenge expectations. What began as a collaborative exploration into blurring boundaries between disciplines has evolved over time as we build and test new ways to expand the practice of architecture. We work between scales within the fractal nature of cities, where tiny interventions affect city blocks and big ideas infect the details. Experimenting with strategies that enhance collective experience, we like to embed the intangible into the tactile. We are rebellious pragmatists, influenced by the ugly beauty and exaggerated sense of casualness in Los Angeles. Graphic space, inside-outside, layering, references, and spontaneity are all at play in our optimistic read on architecture's relationship to culture. We will continue to look for the weird and wonderful, feeding our curiosity with experimentation as we build new social spaces. Thank you.